Good afternoon. I am Andrea Chisholm with the Midday News. A special welcome if you're watching on onespotmedia.com. The Jamaica Defense Force JDF is investigating reports that members of a joint police-military team were responsible for yesterday's fatal shooting of a disabled woman in Augustown, St. Andrew. 44-year-old Susan Bogle of Bryce Hill Road was allegedly shot inside her home by a soldier. Member of Parliament for St. Andrew East, Favour Williams, said residents are angry about the killing.
Because the lady is someone that everybody knows as being a very quiet person, does not necessarily interact a lot with residents. She keeps, in her yard and, doing whatever she needs to do there. So it wasn't anybody that you would have expected this to happen to. So, of course, shock. Everybody was shocked that it had happened, and shock gave way to anger and people asking questions and demanding answers as to what happened.
The Independent Commission of Investigations Indecom says it has already collected statements from family members and members of the security forces.
We responded to the scene and began our investigation. We have spoken to residents, family members, and also members of the security forces who were involved. Today, the team has returned to the scene to conduct further investigation, including a forensic reconstruction of the scene, to include in that the home of the deceased. This reconstruction will assist us in our search to determine how she died and by whom. We will also send the weapons from the security forces for ballistics testing, and we will no more also once a post-mortem examination has been conducted.
Emotions boiled over in Clarendon yesterday as residents took to the streets to demand justice for a man who died reportedly at the hands of the police. More from Dwayne Anderson.
The security forces in Clarendon were kept busy for most of Wednesday morning, removing debris from the roadway. Residents of Havana Heights staged a demonstration for the killing of one of their own, reportedly at the hands of the police.
The first boy, 18 years old, man, justice for him, please. Lick him up a bike. I don't go. One first boy.
Brother, I'm mad at this.
Justice not begin in Jesus' name. On Monday evening, Labor Day, afternoon about 3 after 3, a silver Hilux lick a pink bike and lick off a youth named Tyrone Taylor off at down Osborne Throwaway, otherwise called Skengbu. They drove away, leave him to die. Now him dead at 17.
That residents' view aside, the circumstances surrounding the incident are not immediately clear. The police have, however, confirmed that a service unit assigned to the Clarendon police was involved in the crash that led to the young man's death. The Independent Commission of Investigations Indecom has been made aware of the incident and is looking into the matter. The latter is good news for residents as they do not want any cover-up. They are demanding that all the officers who were assigned to a silver Toyota Hilux from the Clarendon police on Labor Day be questioned in relation to Tyrone Taylor's death.
In Jamaica, we know say nurse have to sign in at work, police have to sign in, don't think very media have to sign in when they reach our work for show some of their work. No, they already know how kill people them penny, they just don't want to talk. And that is very unfair. For
residents and relatives, the young man's death is even harder to take because of what they say was the nonchalance of the police in taking the young man to hospital after he was struck from his motorcycle. The residents who claim to have knowledge of the incident say the police were more concerned about seizing the motorcycle after the crash. The security forces managed to restore order to the area, with traffic eventually finding smooth passage. Dwayne Anderson, TVJ News.
Parliament is now set to debate the report which recommended changes to the Indecom Act to give Indecom the power to arrest and prosecute members of the security forces. Justice Minister Delroy Chuck on Wednesday tabled the motion.
Be it resolved that this House of Representatives, A, agree to consider the report in light of the recent Privy Council decision on the institutional strengthening of the ODPP with a view to adopt such recommendations in the report as it sees fit, and B, adopt such measures to strengthen Indecom and its investigative capabilities.
Earlier this month, the Privy Council ruled that the Independent Commission of Investigations Indecom has no jurisdiction to arrest or prosecute members of the Jamaica Constabulary Force as part of its investigation into an incident. The court determined that Indecom's powers are limited to investigation. Indecom Commissioner Terence Williams later called for the recommendations of the Parliamentary Committee to be urgently implemented. The Pediatric Association of Jamaica is reporting an approximately 70% increase in cases of child sex abuse in Jamaica during the COVID-19 pandemic. Jamaica's first case of the virus was reported on March 10. Pediatrician Dr. Curtis Price says the increase is mostly against girls 3 to 12 years.
As pediatricians, we are accustomed to seeing children being abused, physically, sexually and otherwise. But we have noticed for the past couple of weeks, and it's actually quite recent, probably the past 3 to 4 weeks, that there is a significant increase in the number of cases of child sexual abuse, especially young girls coming in being molested by adult men, 40s, 50s. The girls are between the ages of 3 and 12. And it has been very concerning to us as pediatricians.
Dr. Price says the increase in cases was expected.
This sort of trend, because we know, UNICEF and other organizations have documented clearly that during periods of lockdown, when you have, hurricanes, floods, and that sort of thing, we see upsurge in these cases.
As teachers and students prepare to return to the classroom, more concerns about occupational health and safety during the COVID-19 pandemic. Issues were raised in this morning's Zoom meeting hosted by the Jamaica Teachers Association. President of the Jamaica Civil Service Association, O'Neill Grant, said urgent adjustments are needed before teachers return to school.
You work in classrooms that are not safe. You have teacher-student ratios that are not ideal. You have various rules and regulations about how you work, where you work, that are not ideal. And so we have to look at all of these in terms of health and safety, and how it is that the Occupational Safety and Health Bill is now going to address the risks that we face.
Educators are apprehensive about returning to the classroom on June 8 to prepare students for CXC exams starting July. Schools are scheduled to be physically reopened in September. And it's time for a break here on the Midday News, but stay with us. We have much more stories right after these messages. Welcome back, and we're continuing the news. Prime Minister Andrew Holness says the COVID-19 pandemic has provided an opportunity for the global community to respond in a more strategic and comprehensive manner to the needs of developing countries. Mr. Holness was speaking at a virtual high-level meeting this morning hosted by the United Nations to address critical issues relating to the economy.
This pandemic has demonstrated that every country and every citizen is vulnerable. To build economic and social resilience, we must rethink the traditional indices of vulnerability. I anticipate that the work stream on recovering better for sustainability will explore this critical area and put forward recommendations that incorporate Agenda 2030, the SDGs, the Paris Climate Accord, and the Addis Ababa Action Agenda. Excellencies, together, we shoulder a tremendous responsibility for effective action in the face of this global challenge. This crisis represents a unique opportunity to remedy socioeconomic disparities. We have a duty to ourselves and succeeding generations to put in place a bold, innovative, and resilient system to address the profound structural issues that impact our economies and our people.
The Planning Institute of Jamaica PIOJ is reporting that the electricity and water supply sector has recorded an estimated growth of 2.1% in the March quarter. PIOJ Director General Dr. Wayne Henry says the growth is due to increased consumption. Details in this report.
The Planning Institute of Jamaica, the PIOJ, has started an assessment of the total losses nationally due to the COVID-19 pandemic. PIOJ Director General Dr. Wayne Henry says it's being done using the damage and loss assessment and the post-disaster needs assessment methodologies.
A comprehensive quantification and description of total damage and losses will be undertaken to determine the impact of COVID-19 on the economy and society, to inform the government's policy or program interventions during the recovery phase. So far, the core team has been activated and data collection instruments have been disseminated and reviewed. The monitoring and collection of baseline data is already in process.
So far, the assessment has revealed that the COVID-19 pandemic has affected electricity and water consumption. According to data collected for April 2020, electricity consumption fell by 6%. This is due to lower electricity sales in all categories except residential. That segment of the market grew by 15.2%.
This is partially attributed to the implementation of the daily curfew, work from home, and Tanner Your Yard initiatives during the period. All other customer categories recorded contractions in sales ranging from negative 11.1% to negative 45.7%. This outturn is expected to continue until these initiatives have ended.
Meanwhile, data for last month indicates that water consumption increased by 5.8%. Dr. Henry explains that this performance can be attributed to a general increase in the use of water for sanitization purposes, as well as the stay-at-home protocol, thus increasing residential consumption. Milton Walker, TVJ News.
The parliamentary opposition is again taking issue with the prolonged use of states of emergency to fight crime. Opposition spokesman on national security Fitz Jackson again raised the issue in Parliament on Wednesday.
Even in the state of areas of state of emergency, you're having more murders now than those that are without the state of emergency.
He also indicated that a number of persons are being stigmatized.
Young men across this country in the areas where states of emergency have been declared and who have been detained, a minute amount of those detained have been charged for any crime whatsoever. A minute amount. But what has happened? These thousands of persons have now been stigmatized because, yes.
And in sports, the Premier League season is set to restart on June 17 with Aston Villa taking on Sheffield United and Manchester City facing Arsenal. The matches are the two games in hand. A full fixture list would then be played on the weekend of June 19 to 21. Clubs are still discussing the idea at a meeting on Thursday, but it's understood all have agreed in principle at this stage. There are 92 fixtures still to play. The Premier League was suspended on March 13 because of the COVID-19 pandemic. It will be 100 days after Leicester City's 4-0 win over Aston Villa on March 9 that competition will resume. Games will now be behind closed doors. On Wednesday, clubs unanimously voted to resume contact tracing, having started non-contact training last week. Reggae boy Jeremy Lynch looks set to be the second Jamaican international after Leon Bailey to return to competitive action as measures continue to ease in football leagues across the globe. The 29-year-old who plays for Than Quan Ninh will play in the quarter-finals of the Vietnamese Cup on Saturday against Nam Ha Nam.
Everything is back to normal. Yeah, man, can't wait for play, man. You know, when you're out for so long with no league, you really see how you really love the game, you know. So, just basically can't wait to get back out there and get the chance again to do what I love the most, and that is playing, and hope I can start again scoring, where I leave off.
Lynch has scored 2 goals in as many games in the 2020 season. As the Vietnamese Cup takes center stage this weekend, the V1 League is expected to resume on June 6.
This week, I'm going to make 2 weeks leading up to my first game, so everything was good before I pull up in the practice game after about 80 minutes. It wasn't anything serious, just like a muscle strain, and then put me out and make me rest for 1 week, and now I'm back in training. So.
And that's it for the Midday News. I'm Andrea Chisholm. Join us at 7 for the Primetime News Package. On behalf of the news, sports and production teams, good afternoon.